Hey, good morning, it's Owen, Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, as promised, let's talk about foreign capital coming into the Vancouver real estate market. First off, keep in mind that this inflow of foreign capital, mainly from China, into real estate isn't just a Vancouver thing. This is going on in Southern California, San Francisco, New York, Miami, Seattle, Portland, all down the West Coast. So, first things first, we all know that a lot of this money is coming in from mainland China. What we don't know is how this money is coming in. I'm like everybody else. I read the newspaper articles, the Wall Street Journal, the Vancouver Sun, the Financial Post. There's curbs on how much money you can bring in from mainland China, $50,000 per person per year. But obviously they're getting around this. I can't really comment much more on that. I don't know anything more than anybody else does, other than the fact that these curbs aren't working. They're bringing in millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars in some cases, and are able to purchase Vancouver real estate with it. They're doing this in a lot of cities in the US as well. Second point I want to make here is keep in mind too that the vast majority of these buyers, 85–90% of them, are not foreign buyers. They, through maybe the Quebec Investor Program, have received their permanent residency status and or their Canadian passport. So they are allowed to they avoid the PTT tax, the foreign buyer's tax, and they're also allowed to purchase a home as a principal residence. When it comes time to sell that principal residence, any capital gains tax will go tax-free to them. So here I'm going to give you a story from the front lines in a way that, and a suggestion I have on how we should be leveling the playing field for all Canadian taxpayers, especially for lower mainland taxpayers. Because remember, we've got incentives. The Canadian government has offered incentives for people to buy real estate here for the last 2 decades. Our property taxes are relatively low. People should realize that. I've done blogs on it. Where we get killed is on our income taxes. We're one of the highest paying countries for income tax in North America, if not the world. So here's a situation. I'm going to give you a real life story here. And this has played out many times. I'm not the only realtor that has stories like this, trust me, and I've seen this multiple times before. Here we go. I get a phone call from one of my clients in West Richmond, lives in Boyd Park in a detached house. Called me up about 3.5–4 years ago, said, "Owen, I was walking the dog, noticed a for sale sign on the property directly behind mine. Same size lot, 7,500 square foot lot, original home, about a 2,100 square foot house. Can you tell me how much it's listed for?" Everyone's curious. They want to know what their neighbors' houses are selling for. I looked it up because it had just hit the realtor MLS and wasn't going to be available to the public for a couple more days. And he was curious, wanted the price. It was listed around $915,000. Remember, this is about 4 years ago. About another 35–40 days goes by. He calls me up and says, "Oh, and I was around the corner there again, and I noticed there's a sold sticker on it. Must have just gone up. What did it sell for?" I told him it sold for around $875. I also had said that chances are, because it was a 7,500 square foot lot, a 2,100 square foot house, I said the house is in original condition, but it's in need of renos. It'll more than likely be a tear down, and the new buyer will build a house to the maximum FSR, which would be about a 3,300 square foot house. About 9 months pass. Client calls me again and says, "Oh, and yeah, just to give you an update, you know, you were right. 2 months after that house was sold, they tore it down. And for the past 4 or 5 months, they've been building a house. They've got it framed, they've got a roof, they've got windows on it, but it's probably only about half finished." Strange thing, and that's why I'm calling you. It's been about 3 or 4 months now, and work has just stopped. Nothing's happening. No construction workers. I walk by the house every day. Any idea on what's going on? So I told them right away, I said, chances are there's been a dispute between the owner and the contractor that's doing the work on the house, or one of the trades, or several of the trades. I said, let me run a title search on the property, and I'll see if there's any liens against the title, charges against title. So ran the title search, took 20 minutes. The first thing that stuck out to me, which wasn't all that shocking, was the fact that the owner was a Chinese name, but under occupation was listed as student. So here's what's happened here, and this is not unusual if you ask any Vancouver or Richmond realtor who does a lot of work with detached homes. What's happening these days is money is coming from China. How it's coming out, we don't know. We'll have to find out. I'm not privy to how this money gets into the country, but it does. What I'm seeing is that the husband is buying a house for himself, and he's also buying a house and putting the son on title. Another one, he's buying another house or condo or townhouse for the daughter and putting her on title. Maybe another house for the wife. They're buying multiple properties, declaring one as the bread earner, which is the husband's principal residence, and then putting multiple properties in the siblings or the kids' names. And that's obviously what happened here. It's listed as a student, and we're talking now a $900,000 purchase and another $500,000 building cost. There's no way a student's got that kind of money. I also looked on the title search, and as expected, there was a charge against the title, a builder's lien. So it's quite common. It happens a lot, not with just detached homes, but condos and stratas can have this happen as well. I told my client, yeah, there's a lien on the property. It'll probably get sorted eventually. There's a dispute over the building or over the costs or who's getting paid. It'll probably get settled eventually. Give it another 4 or 5 months. I also told them, though, that your neighbor there is a student. Now, flash back to 3 weeks ago. My client calls me up and tells me, Owen, that house that was behind me, you were right. After about 3 or 4 months, the builders got back and started working again on the house. It's now been a year approximately since that house was complete, and lo and behold, there's a for sale sign on the property. How much is the house listed for? I looked it up. It's now listed at $3.4 million. Might be a tad high, but they'll probably get 3.2 or 3.3 all day for that house. So here's what's going to happen here. This house now, it's been complete for a year. I don't know whether this student, the son, has moved into the house. It's irrelevant, very hard to prove anyways. But they've obviously, put the hydro bill, started the hydro bill a year ago, maybe a cable bill, maybe got some furniture in the house, whatever. But that house now is able to be sold as a principal residence. The son owns it, even though he wasn't really the one that bought the house. And he will receive that $1 million, which is what I estimate the capital gains or the profit will be on that house. Paid $875,000, another $500,000 to build it, some holding costs. They're going to make about $1 million on that property. That $1 million will flow to him completely tax-free. Now, here's my solution to this, and I'm not the only one that has addressed this. We need to start tying in the Income Tax Act to home purchases. In other words, if you are listed on the title on that home as a principal residence and are able to sell that home capital gains tax-free, you have to prove that you are the true owner of that property. In other words, this student, this young kid, has to prove that he has been working in Canada, he's filed a tax return, he can justify the income he's been earning to make that $300,000 or $400,000 down payment when he bought the house 5 years ago, and also substantiate the income he had to build that house, which would be about $500,000 or $550,000. When we know that's not the case. The true owner of this property is his father, who's footing the bills here, and he will probably be the one who receives the capital gains. And he's essentially owning multiple principal residences. So the simple solution to this would be to, again, tie it into Revenue Canada, tie it into the Income Tax Act. You can only have one principal residence if you're the true owner of that property. You can't buy multiple properties and put them into different names if you're going to avoid that capital gains tax. Now, is this, if they change this, and if you do buy a property and put it in a kid's name, you have to prove your income, is it going to make a big difference in real estate prices? Probably not. The realtors that I talk to who work exclusively with offshore buyers, Chinese buyers that in most cases, again, as I say, they've got their passports or they've got their permanent residency status. they tell me that these wealthy individuals will probably still want to buy multiple properties because it's considered a safe haven, a good place, a safe place to park their money. And remember, so they would still buy the property for the kids. The only difference now is they've only can clarify it as one principal residence. If they sold that house that was in the child's name, they would have to pay capital gains on the gain, which is still a pretty darn good deal for this guy. Because let's face it, he's made $1 million. 50% of that gain would be taxable, so that's $500,000. Would be taxable at, let's call it the real buyer's income, which is the father. He's going to pay, let's say $150,000 or $200,000 in capital gains tax. The other $800,000 would go tax-free. But that's, I think, going forward would level the playing field. I think they would still buy multiple properties, but at least it would bring in hundreds of millions of dollars into the general tax coffers, which could be used for, I don't know, I'm not holding my breath, but maybe it could reduce my income tax bill a little bit. We're paying through the nose. If it didn't do that, I'm not holding my breath for that, but at the very least, it's money that would go into the general coffers for things like schools, hospitals, roads, diking, protective services, childcare, whatever. Right now, the way I see it is people are using the system, and they're capitalizing on this principal residence and getting all that money tax-free. They're not declaring any income in Canada, and they're not filing a tax return. So in other words, they're not putting any money into the system, but they're taking out millions of dollars in capital gains tax free and clear. So the UBC professors, there's been a few that have talked about this, and from what I read in the newspaper, Revenue Canada, they tried tracking some of this foreign capital coming in. It was a lost cause. Apparently, they just don't have the manpower, and when you're dealing with banks in China, very difficult to get any information. They had a few cases. There were some leaked documents that came out years ago. Canada Revenue was looking into auditing some buyers. They couldn't figure out the paper trail on it, and it took years, and the payoff just wasn't worth it. Where I think it could be worth it is, again, to simply tie it into the Income Tax Act. If you're going to buy a house in Vancouver, you have to file a tax return that substantiates the income earned to make that down payment if you're going to qualify for a principal residence. If you're going to put multiple properties in different kids' names, go right ahead. But you cannot designate that as a principal residence if that child was not the true buyer of the property and did not come up with the money or earn the money to make the down payment on it. Pretty straightforward. Again, it's not going to have a huge effect on pricing. At least I don't think so, because the realtors I talk to say they'll still buy multiple properties, but it would at least level the playing field again and provide hundreds of millions of dollars annually into the general coffers. And just maybe, instead of writing a six-figure check to Revenue Canada like I do every year, maybe I'll only write an $80,000 check. I don't know. But at the very least, it would go into the coffers for infrastructure, which right now they're not getting because these buyers are not filing a tax return. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.